So like I said, tonight is turning fruit. Um, I'm going to specifically be showing you an apple, but there are other things you can make. I've got a pear and a pineapple. Apple made out of pine. Thank you.
Oh, cute.
Sorry.
I missed that.
I made a little box shaped like an apple. The theme for today is loosely fitting lids, so I fit that very well. So to start out, I just wanted to show, this is an actual apple. You can see it's got the sticker on it.
Gonna pass that around?
If anybody hasn't seen an apple before, you're welcome to come up and take a closer look. But just a couple of things I wanted to point out about an actual apple before we get started on turning an apple. First of all, if you buy 10 apples, all 10 are going to be shaped differently. So don't ever freak out about the shape of your apple when you're turning it, because it's nature. It's not going to be perfect. The widest part of the apple is typically towards the top. It's usually about a third or so from the top. The whole golden ratio from that appears in nature also applies to apples. The indentation on the top, if you look at it, it goes a lot deeper. If you never actually noticed it before, you can really, you'd be surprised at how deep it is. Same on the bottom. So when we're doing the ends of the apples, I try to get pretty far deep. Not necessarily this far, but the further deep you go on the ends, the better it's going to look. You can see on this box that I made, I didn't want to go too deep because I didn't want to pop through the top of the bottom of the top, and it just doesn't have quite the same look as this one where it goes in a little bit deeper. So this one? Sure. Alright. So here's the wood I'm going to be using tonight. It's a piece of spalted water oak, and the stem is going to be made out of walnut. Any questions before I get started? Alright.
Are most of yours hollow or solid?
That's kind of so I drill a hole on both sides to mount it into a screw chuck, and sometimes that hole goes all the way through, so it's technically hollow. But no, I don't hollow it out. It's a solid piece other than the hole for the screw chuck. I did a lot of these demos, practice demos leading up to this, and this is my first demo. Tom told me that if I make it in under an hour, that I'm good, but if I go over that, then all bets are off. So we should should have you guys
Torches and pitchforks.
It took just under, or right around 50 minutes or so you guys don't have too much to worry about unless there's a lot of questions. If I'm in production mode, that's one thing also I want to talk about is they're great teacher gifts. If you have kids or grandkids that have teachers make these, they're fantastic. Last year, at the end of the last school year, I made a bunch of these for my kids, and if you're batching them out, I can turn just the base of it in, I don't know, start to finish, maybe 15-20 minutes if I'm really going at it. And then this stem is real fast also, so you can knock them out pretty quick.
What's the dimensions of your starter block?
Yes, thank you. I start with about 3" by 3" by 4", the 4" length. There's going to be some waste to it, so if you have a piece that you really a piece of wood that you paid a lot of money for or that you really like and you don't want as much waste, you might want to take a little bit more time to measure it. But I'll kind of walk you through how I get to the dimensions, how much waste there is, how much I cut off the end, and everything like that. So, go ahead and get started. The first thing we'll do, obviously, is make the block round. Can you guys hear me while I have the mask on? Okay.
Your microphone doesn't sound like it's plugged into your, it's wobbling out here when we're trying to listen. Check your microphone where it plugs in on the unit at the back.
I'll be stuck it back where I can't get it.
Now talk, let's see.
Hello, hello. Is this any different?
It's got a shape.
It's, in all fairness, it's the microphone. Alan had a new one, but it didn't work out. This one's shot.
We're working on getting a new system.
So, if you guys have trouble hearing anything I'm saying, just speak up and I'll be happy to repeat myself or move the microphone and say it just out loud. Alright, so it is spindle turning. The grain is going lengthwise here. So I'm going to be using my spindle rough and gouge to get it round, and I'll be running at about, probably about 1500 RPM. That's what works for me. If you're comfortable somewhere else, speed-wise, that's perfectly fine. Rest the tool on top, it'll usually turn it. If it jumps around, you'll know that there's a flat spot. So I've got a flat spot here. Looks like that's a little bit on here. I'll keep on going, giving it a twist up a little bit. Round piece of wood. I'm going to make a tenon on this side because I'm going to flip it around and tuck it up. If you're using a piece of wood that you have a preference on which end is the top or the bottom, you're going to start with the bottom towards the tailstock because when you flip it, that's going to be the bottom of your apple. If you have like a crack in the wood or something that you want to get rid of, put that on the headstock side because, like I said, there will be some ways to be able to cut that part off. This wood is fine, so it doesn't really make a difference. So I'm going to make a tenon. I like to use my 1-inch skew. It's got the angle on it already that kind of lends itself to making a nice dovetail for the jaws to grab onto. And if you start out with the drive center locked into the jaws, it kind of gives you a guideline looking at the jaws right here to see what size your tenon needs to be. But I also have a nice little template that I use to see when my tenon is the right size. So I'm kind of looking back and forth between here and my jaws so I can get pretty close to the right size. And just double check it with my template there. I've been trying to get comfortable with the skew. I know that a lot of people are afraid of it. It's definitely takes some getting used to, but I do enjoy using it. Sometimes I will use the skew to turn an apple, but I'm not going to do that tonight. Alright, so that's a good size tenon. So I'm going to reverse mount this into the chuck. Try to center out. And just make sure you're applying a good amount of pressure from this side so that it's seated nicely into the chuck. Alright. So like I said, this is the bottom now because we flipped it over. This is the going to be the top end. For the sizing of the blank, I have a calipers, but I really don't care what the measurement says. All I'm going to do is just set it to the width and then transfer it to the length. And that's going to be the length. We're sitting right at 3 inches. So this is all going to be waste. I am going to be using a screw chuck, and if you don't have one, this is a good opportunity to make one. All a screw chuck is just a piece of wood with a tenon on it and a screw driven through it. Sorry. So just a piece of wood with a tenon on it, and you drive a screw, drill a pilot hole while it's on the lathe, so that it's centered, and then drive a screw through it. So if you don't have one, this is a good opportunity to use to make one. If your screw is not threaded all the way down to the bottom, you want to make it thicker so that there's some bite, some wood for the screw to bite into. I've already got one, so I'm not going to be keeping this waste. I'm just going to cut it off. So let me transfer the line there, and then I'm just going to use a parting tool to cut it down to size. Cut. I bet that never happens to anybody else, does it? You always just catch it perfectly right off the lathe.
You didn't hit anybody, so you know. It's all
Could have
good.
been worse. All right. So
Don't hit the gas.
sorry.
Don't hit the gas.
So I had mentioned about the where the widest part is on the apple up towards the top. So that's what I'm going to be marking next on the blank is the widest part for turning. And I usually will draw a line about in the middle and then maybe just a couple of millimeters up from that. So I find that is a pretty good guide. So I'll do a click mark there and then just go up a little bit to right about there. So this line right here is going to be the widest part of the apple. And now comes the actual shaping of the top. So I'm just going to be using my 1/2 inch spindle gouge. Again, just to kind of recap, it's going to be a curve around the top and then bring that curve down into the inside of the top of the apple. Does anybody have any questions at this point? We good? Time, how many doing the time?
You've been, let's see, you're about,
You got 5 minutes left.
50 minutes in, so you're okay so far.
Alright.
I'll give you a 5-minute,
Every 5 minutes?
every 5
Yeah,
minutes.
he
Sounds
didn't
good.
allow for a question.
No question.
I'm just working that curve back to my guideline there. So I'm adjust my tool rest around a little to be able to get down to the inside. I hear all that popping now.
It's just
I
a
think it might be the microphone hitting my mask. Face shield.
Okay, I'm not gonna steal your thunder, but you all need to pay attention how he's using that spindle gouge, because he's got it down. If you notice how he's lifting it and he's turning, but he doesn't move his arms, he's just using his body. So he'll give you a good lesson here.
Well, thank you. That's high praise. I know, right?
Got that in there for you, Tom?
Yeah, now you'll get the catch.
Now it's gonna sling across the room.
There you go.
No, you won't.
Alright, so again, I'm going to be bringing the curve down onto the inside of the inside of the top. There it is. Ah! Yep. Thanks a lot. That's good enough. That side, I'm still going to work a little bit on the inside here, go a little bit deeper. I think that's good. This is not going to be perfect, but it's fine. I'm not here for a lesson in how to turn, I guess, or how to make perfect apples. Alright, so we've got the shape of the top. We got the shape of the top done before, so we're going to flip it over onto a screw chuck, and before we do that, we will finish the top and then drill a hole through the middle there. We just had that demonstration on finishes, so I decided to do something a little bit different. For most of mine, I like to use the CA glue and Yorkshire grit. Works really nicely for this project, but I'm going to do some wet sanding with walnut oil and finish it with some beeswax. So wet sanding is a great way to reduce the sawdust in your shop. If you have a wood that's harmful, or you just don't want to be breathing in the sawdust, then use wet sanding. It's a great way to reduce the sawdust. Basically what it does is the sandpaper will kind of collect all the sawdust and dunk it together with the oil that you're using. Sandpaper. But kind of the negative of that is that you go through a lot more sandpaper because you can't reuse the same part of the sandpaper. I'm going to start with 120. This is, I know, everybody's favorite part, watching somebody stand up here and sand. But you can see how the sandpaper just kind of catches all the sawdust there. And you can just reapply the oil as you go. While I'm sanding, does anybody have any questions or great jokes besides the pineapple joke that I've already made? Almost done. Gonna get to some more fun parts. This wood came from a tree branch that was hanging out over my truck where I park in my driveway, and it had died. Most of the tree was okay, but this branch had died, and I knew that if I didn't take the branch, God would, and it would land right on my truck. And so I cut it down, and it was a beautiful piece of wood, so it all worked out. Alright. So the other thing about wet sanding with the oil, you kind of gotta, it adds that kind of pop that the finish does already before you put that final coat of wax on it. So for the wax finish, I like to use my church socks. They're holy. To polish in the wax, but I just get it from Amazon, these little chunks of beeswax. And then with the speed still kind of low right now, I'm at 590. Just rub the wax onto the wood. And then you crank the speed up to kind of melt it into the wood. The friction melts it. I'm going to go up to about 1500, probably could go higher. But that's going to give it a nice wax finish. For the hole on the inside, there's a few different ways you can do that. You can get the tailstock mounted drill chuck or one of these handheld chucks, and that's what I'm going to be using. It's cheap from Amazon, but if you're doing a bunch of them, it's a lot easier than bringing the tailstock back up and turning it into the wood. So.
How big of a hole are you doing?
So the size of the hole you use is going to depend on the size of the screw in your screw chuck. Mine is and also depending on if you have a harder wood or a softer wood. Like for the pineapple that I made, I had to change my hole diameter to be smaller so that the screw chuck had more wood to bite into. This one is 9/64. I'm using, I think, a number 12 screw in my screw chuck. When drilling, turn the speed down. It's also important, at the center of your hole, that it doesn't have a nipple on the inside of it. It's got to be a dimple. It's got to go in to give your drill something to ride into instead of try to go around. So that's going to get your hole straighter. And put a little depth gauge on your screw so that you know how far. You basically just put it next to the screw coming out of your screw chuck, and that's how far your hole needs to go. So again, speed down, and at about 400 RPM or so, and just go straight in. You'll be able to tell if you're not going straight in because your drill will start going all around in circles. And it does not have to go in perfectly for this. Kind of the whole theme of making these apples is the lack of perfection. So don't get hung up on it being exactly perfect because it doesn't have to be. If it goes on your screw chuck a little crooked, there'll be a little bit of a ridge between the transition from the top to the bottom, but it's easy to fix with some 80 grit sandpaper, so don't get too hung up on that. Alright, so I'm going to reverse chuck this back into the screw chuck. That's over here. And I put some paper towel here just to pad my apple from the screw chuck. You can put too much paper towel there. I found that out the hard way, and it makes the connection between the apple and the screw chuck a little bit off, and it wobbles a lot more. So I've found that 4 layers of paper towel is good.
What's the reason for the paper towel in the first place?
It just protects your piece from rubbing on the screw chuck. So if it's not on there as you turn, so when your tool is pushing this way while the blade is spinning this way, so it'll actually get tighter as you turn. Not a lot, but a little bit. So if there's any more motion of it spinning like that, it's not gonna like burnish the top of the apple or anything like that. It's gonna just be a nice little protection there. Any other questions before we start on the bottom?
Yeah, so I noticed you didn't worry too much about it being square. I mean, if you pulled the tailstock up right now, you may not necessarily.
And it probably isn't, honestly.
And that's okay,
Yeah,
right?
it's perfectly fine. It'll be somewhat close. That actually is dead on.
Well, of course it is, because I brought it up.
Right. I brought it.
But my point is.
Well, I just made this screw chuck yesterday. This is the one that I had been using, and it is off a lot more than this one. And all the apples except for the one I made yesterday, it came out just fine.
No, I meant, is it more cool to have it a little off center, or you like them square?
I mean, it depends. You'd have to probably make it really off center to be noticeable.
Okay.
It's once you get it, I mean, I guess.
Okay, I'm just.
It's going to be fine either way, I guess. I've not made any that are significantly like off center turning, but that's actually something I might try now. Bend my screw a little bit more and make some a little bit wonky apples. So the hard part for that would probably be getting the transition. You might need to do some hand sanding because what I've found when it's not perfectly straight is there's going to be a bit of a ridge in part. Like some of it will be smooth, but then there'll be a ridge on one side. that you have to really sand to get the ridge down. But that's probably going to be the only issue that you might run into. Alright, so the bottom is essentially the same as the top, just a little bit of a different shape. It's a longer curve, but it's just like the top. We're going to go curve it down and bring it back into the middle. So, I'll go ahead and get started. How am I doing on time, Tom?
Barely.
Alright. I'll skip a couple of steps so I can get back on track. Alright, speed going back up to 1500 or so. And I do typically leave the tenon. I don't cut that off. It kind of becomes a part of the bottom. You'll see as I'm going down. You can see there's a little bit of a ridge right here. I'll try to soften that up a little bit. I'm not sure, can you see that on the camera?
Mm-hmm.
But you can see that it's not perfectly centered. If you follow this line, it's not perfectly straight. And again, that's just fine. And I'm just going to try to soften that ridge up a little bit, because you can get most of that out with sanding. And any of the apples that I've made that I'm not terribly happy with will usually have a little bit more of a ridge there, so I try to work that down whenever I can. That 80 grit is definitely a friend when it comes to the ridge. Alright, let's just bring my tailstock around to the side to finish off the bottom. Rounding up the end of it a little bit is kind of funny. This is tinsel. I think that's good enough. see a perfect apple at the end to get the gist of how to make the apple. So we're going to keep on going. All right. So again, the step, just like at the top, is going to be to finish, sand and finish, and then we're going to drill a hole for the bottom of the apple. And I'll show you what I do for the bottom. I don't think I talked about that yet, but I'll show you what I do for that once I get this sanded. So I'm going to probably be a little bit more liberal with walnut oil on the bottom, since I'm going to be starting with a lower grit. But first I just want to stop that and admire the spalted wood. That's so cool. Sorry, that was for me, not for you. Alright. So I'm going to start with the 80 grit because that ridge, I just got to knock that down a bit. So sanding, low speed, at 342 RPM right now. Taking this off. So let's focus first on this ridge, because again, that is really the most important part to get right. Anytime there's a ridge there, I'm always disappointed. I brought more sandpaper. I had a feeling I'd be going through that. I'm ashamed to admit how much of my shaping is done with sandpaper.
That's very encouraging words from
Everything you look at online, it's, oh, if you can't sand with 400 grit right off the blade, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, well, I turn with 80 grit more frequently than I'll ever admit.
I'm just going to go ahead and get all my new sandpaper. As you can tell, I've recently had to break into my new stash of sandpaper. I went from the yellow to the purple. I had bought a whole bunch of 80 grit. That's why I still have the yellow 80 grit. Alright. Try to move through this quickly. I think this wood is nice enough that I could do whatever I want to it and it would still look amazing.
What did you say the name of the wood was again?
Excuse me?
What was the name of the wood again?
It's oak. It's water oak,
Water.
but it's got some pretty awesome spalting in it. I always realize I'm turning with my wedding ring on when I go to feel it like this, and I'm afraid of my ring scratching it as it goes around. So again, just to recap with this, I'm rubbing the beeswax onto the wood, and then I will polish it with my church sock at a high speed.
So do you have to reapply the wax over time, or is it a long-lasting finish?
I don't know.
Over time it wears off.
I think over time it wears off. Raise the speed to friction the wax into the wood. These are decorative things, so they're not going to get handled a lot. So it might wear off, but it'll probably take a while. Alright, so the last step for the apple is to drill a hole into the bottom. So again, drop the speed. At about 450. This is a little bit less imperative that you get a good straight hole, because this is really just for decoration. I'll show you that in just a second. Yeah, my hole's not perfect. This is, so for the bottom of my apples, I put a clove in, and that kind of mimics the little, I don't even know what you call it. It's going to mimic the little leafy thing at the bottom of the apple. And so you drill a hole into the bottom of it just to stick the clove into. There it is. Turned out pretty nice. Alright, so for the clove, I mean, it's just what you get from the grocery store. Whole cloves. I try to get one that's kind of nice and fat, or whichever just pops out first. And I'm not sure if you can see. So the clove has a little bulb on the end of it. And so I like to take that little bulb off, leaving just like a four-pointed star looking thing. And it's super easy to take off using a utility knife.
Is this when you need that CA glue your fingers?
I suppose if you're not careful enough, then yes. So it's super easy to take off. You just kind of slice it down the middle and it kind of falls away.
Okay. Thank you.
And what you're left with is like a four-pointed star little thing. And we're just going to glue that into the bottom. There's a little medium CA. Trying to take the top off. Just the dot. Alright, and then we will put this aside to dry while we make the stem. There's a couple of different ways you can make a stem. You could make it right there on the apple. I've seen people do that before. It would turn out kind of like this one where it's just straight up and down. But I like to give mine a little bit of character, stick out to the side, a little bit of an angle up top. Just makes it look a little bit more fun, I guess. Since this was a box, I made it straight up and down, so it's more like a little knob for the, like a little handle. But essentially, the stem is going to be a funnel shape, tapered down to a diameter that would fit into the hole that you drilled. and then you can cut it off at an angle, or you can part it off and take it to a belt sander and sand it down to an angle. Since I don't have my belt sander, I'll be cutting it off. Here. Sorry. I'm borrowing these chucks from Tom because I only have one that wouldn't fit this lathe. And so every time I go from the apple to the stem, I have to change my jaws. So that's why I try to batch them out wherever I can. Because it's a really big pain in the butt to swap out your jaws when you're almost finished with a project. So for the stem, I'm just using a little piece of walnut. As you can see, I've already kind of started using this one for another stem. This is about the diameter that I'll take it down to for the tip of it. Let's see what that is. It's 44/100ths of an inch. About 11 millimeters. Yeah. So, excuse me. The length that I typically go for, I don't measure it, so it's between an inch and feeling like, I think the longer ones might look a little bit better, because especially if it goes in deep, so like this one, the stem is just kind of barely sticking over the top. So if you could see it more when it's sitting up, it's probably better. So for the tip of it, this is going to be the end that goes into the apple, and then the top of the stem is going to be on this side. So I made this little template. I just drilled a hole with the same size drill bit that I used for my mounting the apples, and I'll just kind of use this to test fit the end of the stem every now and then to see if it fits. And once it fits, then I'll turn the rest of the stem. Anybody have any questions? Comments? Anything? Speed back up. We're almost 1600 RPM. So I'm just going to take this down. I'm actually going to use my skew. This is a good thing to use your skew for. You can do different kind of cuts with this. You can do a planing cut, or you can practice your, I forget what that's called, other kind of skew cut. I'm going to start by bringing the tip of it down to the right diameter that will fit inside of the apple. It's really small. that's fine. Alright, and I'm going to shape the rest of the stem. And like I said, it's essentially just a funnel shape from the top. It is a little bit small on the bottom, so I'm just going to kind of wedge my shape down into that. It's not going to be perfectly straight, but that's fine. Let's see what that's going to look like. Yeah, that's going to be fine. I'm going to taper the top just a little bit more. And this thing sands up pretty quickly. If you need to sand it at all, throw a little bit of oil on it. And I'm just going to hit it with 320 and 400 just real quick. This is going really slow. Take that up to about 350. Any other questions on sanding?
Did you dry your apple, the wood before you started?
This wood is green wood. Kiln dried or green wood will work fine. I have made an apple out of some peach wood, and it split immediately, which really bummed me out because I just got some of this, a bunch of this peach wood. So, I mean, it's not hollow, so there is a chance of splitting. Try not to do anything with the pith in it, for sure. The one that I did out of the peach was from a branch, so it had the pith in it, and it didn't stand a chance. Where's my... Just going to finish this real quick with some beeswax. This little transition from here to the bottom of the stem is not, I don't typically have that. That's just kind of because I made the bottom too small. So I'm kind of using the top of that to wedge itself into the hole. So here is where it's time to part off the stem. You can just part it straight off, have a straight top. You can part it straight off, take it to a belt sander and cut it in, or sand it to an angle. Or take a knife and I can rock this, right? Does it stay rocked?
Push the slider.
There it goes. The angle doesn't really matter, it's just whatever you're comfortable with. I do kind of like using my belt sander better because there's less tear out than when you're cutting it off with a saw. But there it is. I will sand it down. That gives you a really sharp edge, so I try to knock that down a little bit. Just just using the sandpaper that I've got out already. So I sand the top of it and then just rub the corner around. And then I'll just rub this into the oil that I've got. And I don't know if it's entirely necessary, but I'll rub it on my beeswax too. Alright, and then for putting the stem in, you can just drop it straight in like that. But again, I like to give it a little bit more character, so I'll actually take a drill with the same size drill bit. Again, this is 9/64, and I'll just drill a hole in at an angle. Coming to the home stretch, Tom, how am I doing on time?
Wrap it up, Doug.
Yes, sir.
It says the milkshake window closes.
No pressure there.
Well, there it is.
There it is.
Nice job.
All right.
So, I don't know, do you want to pass it around, or
Yeah.
the top's going to still be a little bit wet with the glue, so just don't twist the stem.
You got 20 minutes left.
20 minutes? Any
I got a
requests?
So the ridge on it,
Mhm.
the ridge was because it was slightly out of
Yeah,
Right.
it's
Right.
square.
Yeah, if it's slightly out of square, just because of the yeah, the way that it's spinning off center, some of it's like part of it will round off and part of it will just kind of come to a point. But yeah, just hitting it with some sandpaper. As long as you're aware that there's a ridge and you sand until there's not, then you're fine. Any other questions? Yeah, like I said, teacher gifts all day. I had a craft fair right before school ended last year, and I can't remember if it was April or May, and I didn't bring very many apples, but I wish I had because they sold out immediately. So people love them.
What did you
So.
sell them for?
$15.
How much?
15. Any other questions? Cool.
I wanted to say it looks nice in a bowl with a bunch of apples. Yep.
Yep, that's for sure.
Thank you, Doug.
You're welcome.
Good job.
All right, time to have our drawing.
Like been doing that forever.
Before we
You did a great job.
do the drawing,
Talk me, Ben.
Peggy mentioned earlier about the power carving depot, which is now is owned by Ken Winter, who used to own Woodturner Woodturners. He may own a piece of it, but